Another year down, and now it's time for us to do our top 10 list of the year. We're going to kick it off with my favorite toy line, or collection of toy lines, I guess, the retro-style wrestling figures. So I'm counting these as either figures from the vintage Hasbro toy line, or one of the remake toy lines that came out during the year and just really struck an accord with me. What you see in front of you are 5 figures that I really heavily considered, but they didn't actually make it into my top 10 for the year. But the rules of this are very simple. These are not figures that came out this year, these are figures that I bought this year. And I have to own a figure for it to be under consideration for my top 10. There's been a lot of great stuff from Zombie Sailor Toys, especially. I don't have a lot of those real standout figures, unfortunately. But we do have a pretty strong lineup, and pretty much for all of our themes, we're going to be giving a top 10 video. We're starting off with this one because it's been a year of retro Hasbro on the channel for me. I, of course, did the top 10 wrestlers who need a Hasbro-style figure, and the Christmas special was that really big every single retro wrestling figure that I own. So, good place to start, but let's get straight into the list. Representing Epic Toys, formerly known as Cello Toys, I had to give Big Daddy a place on the list. Removable top hat and removable vest are both big things in favor of this Big Daddy, but also I like the style, I love his face, the little smirk he has, and it's just nice to get this obscure wrestler in the Hasbro style. It feels like he should have always been there, even though he never stepped foot into the WWF, now WWE. So, the Big Daddy is a big favorite of mine, and he absolutely deserved to be on a list like this. At number 9 is one of the newest additions to my collection. I literally unboxed this guy in the every Hasbro-style wrestler I own video. But this Bastion Booger, maybe it's just the newness to it. Maybe I still have a little bit of that new bias, but this is just spectacular. Out of everything Zombie Sailor's put out so far that I bought, this might be my favorite thing from them. I adore how they sculpted and painted his beard especially, and the missing teeth. I of course believe that the actual name of this figure might be Mike Booger Shaw, something of that nature. But it's Bastion Booger. He's the Booger Man. One of the worst gimmicks ever, and yet a figure that is so perfectly at home in the classic Hasbro line. I adore this figure, and I would love for Zombie Sailor, and in all honesty, pretty much every other vintage toy maker out there, to really focus in on that new generation era. There's a lot of really good toyetic wrestlers in there, even if they weren't, you know, the best in the ring. He's the Mountie! Oh, I love the Mountie. One of my absolute favorite figures to have found this year. I love his big barrel chest. I love how he kind of crooks his head. He, of course, comes with his shock stick. Unfortunately, my figure, the gimmick is wearing out. He's just a touch loose in his shoulders, and that is sad. But still, a wonderful condition Mountie, and a figure that I had been looking for many, 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 many years. So getting him in hand, finally, is something of like a weird collecting highlight for me. There's just something about finally getting a really good figure of a really niche performer that I really enjoyed from when I was a kid. So, representing the very first spot taken up by an actual vintage Hasbro figure, but definitely not the last one on this list, the Mountie is ushering in the more classic side of our lineup. I technically could have put the other Lex Luthor on here as well, the one that Mattel Creations did, but this original vintage Lex is just perfection. The best figure Lex Luger has ever received, and still just an absolute dazzling figure. I really did enjoy his narcissist gimmick. I kind of hate that we never got to see more of it, but it's just nice that Lex Luger got to have a figure in the vintage toy line, and he had one of the best ones for my money, one that still definitely steals attention when you put it on the shelf because of the color combination and the fact that there's always just going to be a little bit of charm to the old original Hulk Hogan mold. So for all those reasons, he definitely deserved to be spot number 7, but let's see who could have toppled the American-made Lex Luger. Why, none other than the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, of course. Unfortunately, as I said in my other video, he is broken. His gimmick no longer works. but it's so magical to have Dusty after all these years of looking for him. I'm definitely on the lookout for one that's still intact, but I'm just happy to finally have this guy on the shelf. He looks wonderful. He's one of my favorite wrestlers ever, and I don't know if I go so far as to say this is my favorite Dusty Rhodes toy ever made, but he's definitely up there. Getting into our top 5 now, we have Giant Gonzalez. His gimmick is still perfect. I did a video of this guy where I just absolutely gushed on him. One of the worst wrestlers to ever enter the WWF, and yet one of the best toys to come out of the original Hasbro line. Well painted, well sculpted, bigger than any other figure in the line. Yokozuna might be wider, but no one is taller. And with a wonderful sneer, it's one of those cases where the toy really conveys what the wrestler was supposed to be. He doesn't quite get into the Mount Rushmore of the year for me, but he came very, very close. Trust me. Number 4 had to go to the Texas Tornado. I've always loved Kerry Von Erich. The movie is just spectacular. I really want to watch it again. And I'm just happy. I'm happy to have this wonderful Texas Tornado figure. And the best part is, of course, his gimmick still works. So let me wind him up real quick. And here, let me actually do it with the other arm. There we go. And boom, we got the Tornado Punch. Still an awesome gimmick. One that should have been kept to just being the Texas Tornado, but of course they did use it for Tatanka later. But still, just look at this guy. He screams 80s and 90s wrestling. And I kind of hate he never went further in the WWF, because I think he definitely had a huge amount of potential. And I'm so happy that his figure not only turned out so perfect, but that I was able to get my grubby little mitts on it this year. But he doesn't quite get a podium finish, I'm afraid. Hasttel Toys. They're Nelson Frazier, also known to me as Mabel. This is the best figure to come out of any Hasbro tribute line to me. I like it better than any of the Mattel Retros. I like it more than any Zombie Sailor or Cella/Epic Toy offering. It's just magical. A figure that feels like it should have been there from the beginning, and he meshes so well with the actual vintage guys. Better than any other figure I've seen. I love this Maple so much that I really want to put him and Mo both on my top 10 of the year. Mo has just... there's nothing wrong with Mo, right? Absolutely nothing wrong. A spectacular figure, but he's a little too close to Mabel, and there were other figures who I thought I wanted on the list more. But Mabel, he could have been my number 1. And the only reason he's not is because I think the 2 best figures from the vintage Hasbro line finally found their way into my collection this year. But if this was just figures that were released this year, Mabel would have won hands down. I cannot recommend any new Hasbro-style wrestling figure anywhere near as much as I can recommend this Mabel. That is how much I adore it. That is how much I am in on the Hasttel Toys lineup, and how much more I want to see from them. And it's all because this Mabel, their trial run with me personally, was just everything and more. I adore this figure. I adore Mabel. But he is just number 3 on my list. At number 2, I had to go the blue singlet Mr. Perfect. His gimmick still works. His paint is sharp. He looks spectacular. It might be my favorite Mr. Perfect figure of all time. And Mr. Perfect might be one of, if not maybe, my absolute favorite wrestler of all time. Something I just kind of realized this year. An absolute, hands down, perfect figure. But not my favorite of the year. Number 1 had to go to Brett. Number 1 had to go to Brett. I looked for years trying to find the perfect Brett for my collection, and I finally found him this year. It is a great condition vintage Brett. I adore everything about this figure. It is my favorite Bret Hart figure. It might be my favorite wrestling figure of all time. And there's not a single figure that I would put on the number 1, not just in terms of my retro Hasbros, but even possibly number 1 in terms of everything I got this year. This Brett has truly made my collection feel just a little bit more special to me. So there we go. My top 10 retro wrestling figures of the year. We're going to have a lot of top 10 lists coming in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned to those. Thank you guys for sticking with me until 2024, and I hope we're going to be doing a video just like this next year. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. I'll go take a nap now.